This podcast discusses sexual violence and other material listeners may find distressing. Please look after yourself as you listen and feel free to switch off at any point. You can visit withyouwecan.org to find help, but remember to call 000 in emergencies. We're recording on the lands of the Gadigal, where sovereignty was never ceded. We recognise that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples continue to experience the ongoing impacts of colonisation, including disproportionate rates of sexual violence and institutional harm. We pay our respects to elders past and present and commit to advocacy that does not replicate the harms it seeks to address. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Victim survivors live in a constant state of the unknown. I know that because I've lived it. Shrouded in secrecy, silenced by process, we're asked to place our faith in a justice system that was never designed for us, at the most vulnerable moment of our lives. But I won't stand for it. We're cracking this system wide open so you and everyone around you understands what it actually means to navigate the legal system after sexual violence. I'm Sarah Rosenberg, Executive Director of With You We Can, and this is What No One Told Us. Episode, we're joined by Jacob Gooden. Jacob joined Victoria Police in 2014 at just 21 years old, stepping into what he believed would be his dream job and lifelong career. Over more than a decade of service, he worked across metropolitan and regional stations in a range of roles, including Youth Resource Officer, Police Aboriginal Liaison Officer, Drug and Firearm Disruption Investigator, and Media Officer, and was twice seconded to specialist task forces. But the work that defined him most was as a specialist detective in sexual offences and family violence, being trusted to help people feel safe, seen and heard during some of the most traumatic moments of their lives is something he considers the greatest honour of his service. In 2025, at 32, Jacob was medically retired following a serious mental health injury sustained in the course of his duties. While that injury ended his policing career, it didn't erase the insight gained from more than a decade on what he calls the privileged side of the counter, alongside formal study in public safety. He now channels what he half-jokingly describes as erratic innovation, an inability to ignore systemic shortcomings, into thinking about better ways to strengthen community safety and social impact. Above all, Jacob is a husband and father of two, and he says every step of the journey has been worth it if it led him back to them. Jacob, thank you so much for being here. We're going to jump straight in. If someone walked into a station right now to report a sexual assault, what would happen?
Well, it is, and I knew that question was coming, and it is a really heavy topic to dive into because having this conversation, we need to strike the balance of acknowledging that there are problems with the system and things need to be fixed about the experience while also not deterring somebody from taking this step.
And also, as we've spoken about at length, striking the balance between us using humour to cope with the gravity of the situation and not scaring people away into thinking that this is a lighthearted issue.
Yes, and it definitely isn't. And something you've heard me say before is we are both coming at this conversation from different sides of the counter, so to speak. Our experiences have come from what I call the privileged side of the counter with a policing experience, and you having stood on the other side of it. And yeah, it is worth acknowledging that I'm from Victoria, so my policing experience is from Victoria. The experience you had was in New South Wales. So this may not be necessarily universal, but there are definitely some themes which, having had my own experience behind the counter and having spoken at length with survivors, I'm trying to combine, I guess a bit of an insight into what that might look like. And, you know, it is, first of all, can I say the decision to walk into a police station is probably one of the bravest things I could ever imagine somebody doing. So if somebody is watching this and they've made that decision or they're contemplating it, and whether it's something they've already done or whether they're thinking about doing it in the future, you deserve to be commended for that. But just stepping in is so daunting because while there are, it's really tough because I can give advice on a safe way to navigate this system. But the reality is that for a lot of people, they're not planning to have this experience. So it's not necessarily going to be the case that somebody's put proactive thinking into how am I going to do this. So for a lot of people, it will be, well, the police station's the right place to go. And if you walk in and it might be a crowded police station, depending on when it is, you know, there's people lining up from all things, reporting lost property, their car's been stolen. And while those things are serious to that person, it is a bit like apples and oranges to say who's having a worse day.
I remember listening to someone report a lost toolbox, and it was just really a great distraction for me just listening to that. But it was like, wow, imagine if I was here for that. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
And then immediately chastising myself and going, oh, that guy's probably having a really tough day. It sucks that his toolbox is gone. But it just feels so surreal immediately because you're not, walking into a special place, at least in most jurisdictions. You're walking into just an average police station and you are surrounded by all types of people from all walks of life. And yeah, it's just immediately a feeling that is so surreal.
That's the reality for the police officer behind the counter as well.
Yeah.
Because for every one Sarah walking into a police station, there's 10 toolboxes. There's more than 10 toolboxes. And in all likelihood, the person who's standing behind the counter is the most junior person on duty at that moment. And it is imperfect. I don't know how you necessarily fix that because it is a little bit of reality. Policing at the front line is jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
But the reality is that Sarah might walk in with Sarah's story. And I guarantee you that person who has just graduated is going to be the most well-intentioned person when you begin to speak of your experience. And I can say that because I did 11 and a half years with Victoria Police. I was once that junior person on the front counter. So I don't say any of this as throwing mud because I've been part of the system myself. But you're so far out of your depth to hear that for the first time. And there are certain subjective components to what it's going to be like. What is the communication style of the person reporting it? Is it because there will be people who come in and I've taken this massive step, I need to say everything all at once.
Yeah.
Because who knows if I'll ever have the courage to go through with this again. I'm going to get it all out and then it's going to be done. Like that might be someone's. And that's a nightmare scenario to be behind the counter because you're going to be furiously scribbling notes. Sorry, can you just say that again? Can you
just repeat the really horrible thing one more time?
Yeah. And the issue with that is, and this is something because you did give me some of the questions ahead of time, and I've really been trying to think a lot about it. The ideal scenario would be, in a perfect world, you would obtain, as that front person on the counter, the least information possible.
Yep.
That will still allow you to inform the specialist to come and get involved. As is often the case, somebody will tell their whole story to a junior member taking notes, and they don't have a recorder going. It's their handwritten notes trying to keep up with you. And then at the end of it, that might be the moment where they realize, oh, I'm out of my depth here. I need to go get a supervisor. Or I need to go get a senior member.
And we've got to start again.
They come out and they do it and they've got notes too. And again, well-intentioned, but we've still then got to go get a detective.
Yeah.
And
where's the detective, right? Does every station have a specialist?
No. And this is another really powerful question to ask because for good reason, you want to house your victim-centric investigators off-site so that if, say, somebody was under surveillance by their offender, because in most instances the perpetrators are known to their victims. If they're watching them and they see them walk into a police station, they know that they've gone to report them. Yeah. So there is good reason to have a multidisciplinary centre off-site. However, that doesn't help this imperfect situation of what happens when somebody bypasses and goes straight in, because, as we said, chances are somebody's not doing all the research on the right way to do this. It's the worst experience of somebody's life to go through this. But to avoid going too far off topic, by the time we get to the end of the detective getting brought up to speed, there's 3 different sets of notes, and that none of them are the statement of what's happened.
None of them are the statement. I think that's the for me, that was something that just from the start I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. This is not like we see in the movies or in Law and Order. And that much is, slightly obvious, but you still think you'd get a little indication.
Yep.
And so for me, that I was already up to my second station and second detective, spent 5 hours reporting, and then was told I should really consider reporting. And I thought I was making a statement. And so many people don't know about that initial report you give before the decision to make a statement is decided. And it's actually it can be quite a useful tool if we bring awareness to it, because that means someone can walk into a police station if they feel safe to do so and have access to one, and they can just register a name, and they can just feel like they've gotten something off their chest. There's maybe a flag next to that person's name in the system now, and it doesn't mean signing a statement and potentially initiating an investigation. Not that that's the victim's choice, but it's quite a good tool, I think. And I don't think that's what it's intended for, but it's been something, I think it's one of the things I keep coming back to when I explain to people their options, that it's kind of creating a little bit of space for a victim to make a decision that they didn't think they had the option to do. But, we know that that's not why. It's more about the imperfect system. So we're up to three people. Statement hasn't been made yet.
Yep.
When does that kick in? And is that up to the victim?
So by the time you get to the detective, and depending on, and there's going to be jurisdictional differences to this, you would hope that the first detective, there has been a sexual offences detective available to come in, and that they haven't had to do the on-call, like regional areas. The on-call person might be, a high-volume crime detective coming in, which would be, just another terrible scenario. And they would have to juggle decisions like, is this report, historical to the sense that there's no active crime scene that needs to be dealt with? Is that part of the conversation? Or is this, if something happened a couple of weeks ago, you can probably be reasonably confident that we can take this a little bit slower, because we're not going to make things worse by waiting till tomorrow to take this statement. But if you were to gain relatively contemporary access to a specialist detective, they should be led by what headspace is the survivor in while they're talking to me.
I know you say should.
Yeah, yes, and this is and because I know that this is such a nuanced space. You can never speak in absolutes with what. Like I did the training. I've been through it all. I know exactly what should and should not be done. Can I tell everyone that everyone who has done that training will live up to that standard? No, I can't. So I'm very strong on my shoulds and woulds and wills. But if somebody looks like they've been up for 24 hours and you can tell that just coming into the station has been a big step for them today, we will, and not to mention just asking the question, do you think you're up for this now, and making them aware that this is going to be a really cognitively heavy experience, and giving that agency
Is a kindness.
Absolutely. And, you know, I am really positive in my reflection on the specialist detectives, particularly within Victoria. I do think they do, once you reach them, that they do extraordinary work. Again, I can't speak in absolutes. I would not tell anyone who had a bad experience that they've misunderstood that, because that is not more personal for anyone than that person to make that judgment. But the barriers that exist to getting to that specialist, that's where I think the largest issues exist. But once you're there, empathy is at the centre of the specialist training.
Yeah.
But that is specialist training, and that is not the first person you speak to.
At what point does someone's disclosure become an investigation?
In terms of an investigation, it's sort of an investigation from moment one, once. But in terms of when it becomes a formal report, that's where it goes onto this, and that will be a decision made by the detectives, and they will absolutely make a report. It will go on the system, but that doesn't mean that it needs to be pursued. So if somebody says, I just want to, if it is one of the, I just want to get this off my chest, and say, they're not going to pretend, they can't unhear that. Like, that information needs to go somewhere for intelligence.
Well, yeah. And you've got local, sometimes it's on such a local level, a police station will have a new protocol in place that's well-intentioned, but completely undermining of not only a victim's agency, but also of almost, for the sector, and given what we know about perpetrators of violence or people who use violence, it's almost commonsensical, but they'll say, no, we're taking DV really seriously this month, and we have a protocol that we have to go and knock on this person's door now that you've reported. And it's like, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to pursue a report then. And it's so difficult when there's
there's like, and I know you've spoken about it. If anyone watching this is on LinkedIn, please follow Sarah's work. She posts incredible stuff there. But you once drew attention to the fact that we often refer to the sector as FDSV, family domestic sexual violence, all as one group. There are very different approaches to the FD and the SV.
Absolutely.
And so some of the issues you touched on there in terms of obligation to bat forward, because with family domestic violence, a lot of that is, once becoming aware of it, there's an obligation to put a protection in place to ensure it doesn't happen again, because there's, the intervention order or AVO type thing. So that doesn't need to proceed to a charge. That doesn't need to reach the same evidentiary threshold. So that's balance of probabilities to get an AVO.
Yeah.
Sydney. AVO versus IVO in Victoria.
Yeah.
To reach that threshold. So there is more urgency in somewhat taking away your agency.
Yeah.
And again, imperfect. Whereas sexual violence, because to pursue that, you need to have a brief of evidence that goes beyond a reasonable doubt. There is far more control put back onto the reporting person.
With that evidentiary threshold, I want to talk a little bit about downstream decision making. How much do you think anticipating a potential jury's attitudes influences investigations before a case even reaches court, let alone the Director of Public Prosecutions?
Yeah, this is one I think if you polled 100 different police, you'd get 100 different answers on it. I sort of got to the stage early where I took that out of my mind completely, and I just assumed. I wanted to go into it, and it's probably from a sporting background. Just like I'll take all negative, and I was terrible at sport. I mean, I could have been a professional if it wasn't for injuries and a chronic lack of talent. Like just those two things, just the lack of talent. But you somewhat need to use a negative perception to sort of fuel you a little bit. So my opinion of the jury I would cast in my head are full of bigots that are going to take the side of the accuser, because let's face it, we do have a legal system instead of justice system. I'm big on saying legal system that is already heavily weighted to the accused. So in my mind, I need to overcome 12 people that have that attitude. So that is going to fuel me that I have to change their mind, or I have to convince them of something. So
when you're saying that, are you taking that to mean I need to collect the best evidence I can? Or are you saying
taking nothing for granted?
Well, because you say that, and that is such a positive use of downstream decision making almost. It's like you're using it to fuel you to get the best evidence that you can, put forward the best case you can, when we know that what's more common is people thinking, well, there's no way this is going to get up in front of a jury. I'm not even going to pursue it, when that's not an officer's job. Yeah.
So I would say, and certainly with Victoria, so worth making the distinction that the sexual offences unit I worked in, we were the state sexual crime squad. And whereas all regional areas in Victoria have sexual offences and child abuse investigation teams, the distinction between the two is that the local regional areas investigated known offenders.
Yeah.
So whereas the group that I worked with investigated unknown offenders. So I'm careful not to make blanket statements that cover off on socket attitudes, but the attitude that I sort of had imparted on me is, it's not for you to worry about where it's going to get to. You put your best brief of evidence, and that is a decision that will be made up the chain. And yes, we can put a note on the front of it that says I'm 100% in this. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that I was at the bottom of the food chain in terms of how much, but I took a great deal of pride in ensuring that the evidence I put forward had the best chance of proceeding. So there's not a heap of it, and I can't say that it wouldn't impact some people in terms of the effort they went to in the evidence. It definitely shouldn't. Like, it's just work it to the bone. Just get everything you can out of it. But there will reach a threshold where management meets with the prosecutors of the jurisdiction, and they will have to answer a lot of questions. Is it in the public interest? With sexual offences, you can pretty much guarantee it's in the public interest to pursue it. Is the complainant on board? Are they willing to proceed? I think there's a couple of others, but the big one that they're going to come down to is, what is the prospect of a conviction? Mm-hmm. And I don't and this is your $1 million question. And if you ask me on any given day whether I like or loathe the attitudes that go into that decision, I could have a different answer on a different day. Because on one hand, let's have a crack at it. But on the other hand, if the people who we're told have the most experience to make this decision say that there's a low prospect, we know what that courtroom experience is like for a survivor. So do we not try and fail the victim because of that? Or do we
try to spare the victim?
Yeah. Or do we run at a brick wall that we think we probably can't knock over, but we need to show the victim that we care enough to try for them? Like, there's harm.
I want to
Either
talk
way.
about intention versus harm because it keeps coming up, that word, intention. And for me, so many of the things that went wrong weren't intentional.
Yeah.
So many of the decisions made by the detectives rotating in and out of my case weren't even, like, a lot of them were flippant and off the cuff and made without much thought, but of course made without malice. And so the problem for me, it wasn't intent, it was perspective. I had a perspective that they couldn't possibly have because they weren't a victim sitting alone in a room that looks like a jail cell that smells weird, mind you. I remember starting to worry about the officers who had to work in the station all day. And that's why conversations like this matter, because harm doesn't require malice. It just requires systems that don't take lived experience into account.
Yeah.
For me, before reporting, I used to think re-traumatization was just telling your story over and over. And for sure, that sucks. I mean, that's an understatement. But what I learned was that it was actually a lot more about the system taking away my agency, just like it was taken during the crime, right at the time I was trying to reclaim it by reporting. And obviously reclaiming that looks different for everyone, but for me it was reporting in that moment. And that's it, just like clicked. And for me it's so obvious now, but I think for a lot of people and perhaps a lot of officers it isn't. It's the powerlessness, it's the replication of the harm that was done. It's not just, oh no, you've had to tell your story 3 times. It's those little things. It's a lack of communication, a lack of choice about when you're reporting, what you're reporting, who you're reporting to. It's decisions being made about you without you. Yeah. And I know that victims can't lead the investigation, let alone the reporting process. But I found that the smallest things that you'd think actually would kind of come naturally in any other interaction.
Yeah.
Were the things that gave me the most agency. Like a simple heads up that today we're going to talk about this part of your story and not that part. Or would you prefer to be contacted by email or by phone? This room or that room? Like tiny things that seem so flippant now when we say it. But for me, I was like, I feel like so much of this comes down to victims being seen as vulnerable, and you're taught like, oh, this complainant is extra vulnerable and needs to be treated with care, and it makes people freeze up and it makes them awkward, and it's like common decency just goes out the window.
Yeah.
When, you know, if you're running late to your family barbecue, you would call whoever's hosting and say I'm running late. Whereas, you know, I would find myself booking appointments, waiting just for them to be cancelled when I could have been told earlier. Like really simple things. And I mean, that one is kind of a bad example of unintentional because yes, they forgot, but God, that sucks. But you'd think the amount of people sort of involved in that detective schedule could have given me a ring. But those other things, they're so small. They're not like police forget that their number comes from an unknown number. Yeah. And so I remember when the detective I had who was the 5th detective, she got into the habit of texting me before she called. And my God, did it make a world of difference. And I still, like, it actually gives me shivers how ridiculous it is that was the thing that helped me most. And I still have a fear of unknown numbers. But they're small things. And so it gets me thinking about, you know, officers are victims of this system too. You guys are cogs in a big wheel that you are not steering. And you are overworked and undertrained and at capacity and working in awful conditions with awful crimes and things like compassion fatigue and burnout and I don't know, whatever else anyone else would experience in a job, hierarchical pressures. Those things would impact you a lot more than they might impact someone else. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really have a question. I'm just...
No, thank you. thank you for sharing that. I think you touched on so many important issues, and I have a level of lived experience with the same themes that I can speak to in terms of the response. So for people watching along at home, I'm ill health retired from Victoria Police due to a mental health injury sustained from the work that I did. And
I also just want to flag that it's such a big deal that you share that. You know, like we don't take it lightly. I think it's so important that people know that vicarious trauma and internal pressures and the horrors that victims experience, you know, are experienced by the good guys too.
Well, you guys are the good guys. Don't undersell
Well,
it.
I don't mean to say that the system is full of good guys, but, you know, just like
Yeah.
every other system, like it's full of good eggs. It's not everyone's fault and it's not always intentional. It just, you reach a point where it kind of doesn't matter when this amount of harm is being done this consistently to this many people across the country. So it's I don't know, it's something like where we have to hold two truths together at once. And then where do you go
100%.
from there?
Yeah, 100%. And there's, and I don't know if that's show notes, but we'll put some a question without notice. But there's a great friend and a former colleague of mine, Jess Murray. She wrote a dissertation on moral injury and compassion fatigue comes into that. And it's a fascinating read. It's a detailed read. I actually spoke to Jess before I came in and I was just like, hey, do you have any...
Get a little pep talk.
Just asking, like, because I'm so mindful of not getting into my own echo chamber with things. I want to open it up. Like everything I've done, and we'll probably speak about this stuff later, I endeavor to do it with co-design and making sure that I'm not just the world according to Jacob, and that other people's inputs are very much shaping what I do. But in terms of, I would say if you had to describe my mental health injury that I came out with, it's probably akin to moral injury, feeling failed by a system, by management on things. And compassion fatigue does form part of that. But one of the things about it is I think it's often oversimplified and taken oversimplified in a very natural way, taking it in its very literal definitions of the two words, fatigued at being compassionate with people, which is not so much what it is. It's about being compassionate all the time and feeling like you're not getting the support to be that compassionate.
It's feeling like you're the only one sometimes, or feeling isolated. And I think a big part of it as well is being let down by a system that you idolized growing up, or you thought it would be one way. And when it's not, that betrayal goes so much deeper.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I'm super, like, I almost, because you try and compare yourself to people like in policing, and this very much isn't the theme, so we can cut as much of this as necessary. But
go on.
Like I very much look at my career and think, well, how do I compare it to other people's career? Like you go, I probably haven't seen nearly as much as what other people have, but then you play the greatest hits in your head and it's like, oh, I've seen some stuff. But I almost think I'm weird in the sense that stuff I probably handled really well. I was probably had really healthy responses to how I dealt with the aftermath of that. So, but I came in with the knowledge that trauma might impact me down the line. So and this is where the moral injury comes into it, where I felt the greatest harm that happened to me was being failed by the systems rather than all the terrible things I saw when the systems fail. And that's what's letting people down. Like when I first went off sick originally, I try to return, and I promise we're coming back to a point here in terms of compassion fatigue. When I first came back via my return to work, I came to a family violence unit. So I went from the role I had before going off as sick was at the sexual crime squad. I came back at a domestic. I know it's all.
Who thought that was good?
But this is the thing, and this was what was big for me. Like I I wasn't actually, and this sounds horrible, I was obviously bothered by every traumatic experience, but I actually handled it well. It was an environment I needed to get out of.
Yeah.
But it took so long to facilitate my return to work. It was about 9 months. So that was 9 months of going downhill, wallowing. Why aren't I at work? I know I can help. Because I have this distorted justice lens where I can't switch off if I'm not doing everything I can, which probably motivates
Moral
everything.
scrupulosity OCD.
Oh, I'm going to write that.
That came up recently on TikTok for me.
That's a great source.
It actually is. I feel like it's like a Wikipedia. It's like a good go-to for starters, and then you got to fact check.
Yes. It's a great source if you fact check afterwards.
Look at it later. We'll chat about it.
But because in that time, my mental health got a lot worse.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a great fit because of the passing of time. But when I went back in, the thing with family violence detectives is you're dealing with the most high risk people at all times. And I was on a reduced hours return to work, and I had a caseload, and I was doing 3 7-hour days on my return to work to ease back into it. But I still had a caseload.
Yeah. And you're obviously wanting to go above and beyond.
Yeah. It was still my caseload for the 4 days I wasn't at work. But I couldn't go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because what if she dies? That I could not, and I think this is where like it was compassion fatigue, because I got so much support in that workplace of, Jacob, you're doing a great job. Like, don't for a second think you're not doing enough. But you can never be doing it.
You
could never be doing enough unless you have.
Because every minute, the stakes here are so high. Every minute you're not doing something, like a woman is being harmed, a child is being put in harm's way or being harmed. Like, the risk is literally death. It's life or death.
Yeah.
And that's not, and then as you're saying, it's interesting because this is something that comes up for me a lot, just in terms of working in reform and advocacy. It's not the content. It's actually the system, the systems at play, and they're replicating these abusive dynamics, and you're up against all odds, and you're hitting your head against a brick wall, and you're just getting a headache because the wall's not going to move. It's the shock of how inefficient or how failing or how dysfunctional the systems are. It's not what you're trying to work on or what you're trying to change. It's so interesting because people constantly, they think it's the work, and it's like with you, it's like they say compassion fatigue, and they go, it must be really hard to take statements about such horrible happenings. And it's like, well, actually, you were really good at that part.
Yeah.
You were really good at making victims feel heard and supported. It was that you were up against a system that wasn't working the way.
And you're playing the scenario out in your head that you know that this doesn't end in something meaningful. Like, it's something that annoys me is that they've just brought in the adult crime, adult time. They've had it in Queensland, they're doing it in Victoria. It's just, hey, it rhymes. I guess that's the most important thing. But the thing is, if we look at, like, let's really apply that, and let's think about, when was the last time an adult got adult time for an adult crime? We're not even applying it to them. Let's not think for a second that we're going to apply it to a young person or that heavy-handed. This is a whole different sort of tangent, but in terms of like our justice response, and like
it's not even thinly veiled anymore.
No.
It's just blanket like racism. Like, it's just, let's really obviously do this, and they're not even pretending that we're changing things under the guise of something else anymore. It's just so obvious and upfront and harmful for marginalized communities.
It's actually really funny that you say, and it just occurred to me then. I have this old notebook, and it's from when I spent time as a youth resource officer. It was just the notebook that I could bring up, but I promise there's a point to this. But something I worked in Mildura, so on the border of Victoria and New South Wales, about as far as you can go in Victoria before actually leaving it. And one of our big things was, if we gave somebody, if there was a young person that we dealt with and we gave them a caution instead of giving them a charge and putting them through it, the caution gave us 12 months to meaningfully engage with them and steer them in, and an excuse to call them every so often and be engaged with them. We got such great outcomes for that. And our recidivism rates came down greatly because we had this approach of redirecting rather than just putting it back into a system that's going to spit them out and give them exposure. Like we talk about, and I think this is nationwide, like the media headlines are saying a lot about youth crime and things like that. But what are we doing to acknowledge that these kids probably aren't coming from very stable backgrounds? How are we engaging them to show them there's a life other than the one that they're in right now? So I'm all for if they are charged, let's make part of their sentencing conditions, not that they go pick up pieces of paper. Let's have an interview with them before they go to court and find out, all right, what are your interests?
Yeah.
How can we redirect you into something else? And, all of this isn't entirely unrelated to what we're talking about, because it is just a fact that people who have been incarcerated are overrepresented as being perpetrators of gendered violence.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can do a better job of meaningfully engaging our young people, and that's broader than just the criminal system, that goes into our education of how we speak to boys.
Yeah. What we expect from them.
Yeah, what we expect from them, and
what we hope for them. I think I love how you've said because I thought you were going to say we should have mandated men's behavioural change sort of intervention programs, and it's like I'm totally for that. But even that, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. And I love that idea of sitting down. What are your interests? How can we actually get through to you and make this meaningful for you?
Yeah, it can't just be the punishment. Obviously, and I'm not an expert in the deterrent space, but I think recidivism rates sort of speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And I understand there needs to be a level of punitive measures, but let's explore that on a deeper level when we've really established that there is no other choice.
Yeah. Okay, we've talked a lot about what's wrong with the existing system. What would a better first door into the legal system look like? Let's talk about safe disclose.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to speak about this. It's really important to me on a personal journey as much as anything. Like one of the things I lost when my health went downhill and leaving, I still felt like I had unfinished business. So how do you lose your ability to help in that conventional way that you learn to as a police officer and still have something? And I found safe disclose. And I think the way you've structured this conversation is really important, because to meaningfully engage with a solution, you need to know the true extent of the problem. And I think it is a necessary part of it we can't pretend this isn't an issue. And so I think the big takeaways are that we acknowledge that system level change is required, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing, because we certainly think that system level change is really achievable. And it should be said that traditional pathways, there is going to be people that want to have that in real life tangible experience of walking in, because that's how they're going to be more comfortable with it. But we can't understate what we went through with COVID as a society and people becoming a more digitally connected space. And we need to embrace that more significantly.
Nor can we underestimate the rising rates of anonymous reporting or the growing research interest in alternative reporting mechanisms. So I think it's all part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And so this isn't a new idea. While SAFE was founded in 2023, I pitched the first rough outline of it in 2020 when I was on my specialist. I still have the piece of paper, which I have a scribbled version of what the flow would look like.
Frame it.
So we were sitting in class and we had an external speaker who was coming in and talking about the realities of underreporting of sexual violence. And at the time I was 87% underreporting. The reports tell us now that it's gone up 92% of sexual assaults for women and girls over the age of 15 won't and this is the most almost the most jarring part of this statement, won't report their most recent assault. Like, that's horrifying. But when I was in class that day, so using 87% at the time, the number itself is obviously confronting, but there was this disposition of, but we'll do the best with the 13% that we do get. And I zoned out into, that's not good enough. And while I'm empathetic to people being tangible and you can only take on the fights you can take, and at the end of the day, they weren't dealing with a room of innovators. They were talking to a room of police officers and telling them it's your responsibility to do the best. So I understood it, but for me, it didn't sit well as probably a creative at my core. So I went away and I created a flowchart, which is essentially an online chat portal, which as soon as you enter into it, you're not required to log in with any identifying features. You're given a unique reference number and you can create a password to link with that unique reference number. You are defined by that unique reference number until you choose you don't want to be anymore. That's all anybody knows about you. The chat portal pairs you with a specialist. So we've talked about the problems and how it's 3 steps removed until you finally speak with the specialist. Mm-hmm. So these portals would be staffed by those specialists, ensuring that the first conversation you have is ensuring that you only have to make one disclosure. And it is in your words. It's not abridged language where somebody is shorthand writing your notes. It's your words coming across. And accessibility needs to be built into that. The ability to pair with an interpreter service, the ability to have voice-to-text functionality, all of those things built into the solution. And also just the ability to invite a trauma support worker into the conversation. If it's easily established that a criminal exploration isn't what this person needs right now, they need help. Let's invite this person into the chat portal. All of this completely anonymously. And then what it's designed to do is to have a guided disclosure conversation where you're asking the questions that need to be asked, and it's built on, like I briefly spoke to you about it outside, and we're talking about, do we need to work through a list of questions in here? It's got to come from the person making the disclosure. Mm-hmm. So we sort of start with an open question. Tell me in as much detail as you can everything you want to talk today. And it is only the specialist that should ever ask that question. I want to make that very clear. And then you are going to say as much or as little that you're comfortable with in that moment. And then it's the specialist's responsibility to, okay, what do we need to pick apart more? So that conversation is one part of it. But then at the end of it, while still anonymous, we get to the most important step, which is what we would call the options talk. And the options talk is essentially starting by thanking the survivor for the incredible courage that it took to put themselves forward and go through that experience of sharing. But then to say, based on what you have told me, I can identify that you've described an offence. This is what a realistic expectation of what would come next looks like. And only after hearing that would they say, now based on everything I've told you, is this a process you would like to continue with? That can go one of 3 ways. Yes, no, I need more time to think about it. If it's yes, then we'll exchange details and we'll take this offline and we'll figure out how to, and we'll go export this conversation, we'll sign it, and that can be your statement. We don't need to do all of that long form answer again. No, it's like, okay, well, you've got access to these support services. If you want me to bring the support worker back into the conversation so you can speak to them at length, please do that. Or I need more time to think about it, which is still the same answer as no, in the sense that you walk away with your unique reference number and you can come back to that at any point in the future where you've had more time to process it. Because in that moment, it might just be that getting it off your chest that's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. You might not have even forecast the prospect of pursuing it, but you knew that this anonymity safeguard that I've got is going to allow me to unburden myself. So what's so important is the agency sense that you can come back to that conversation using your unique reference number and the password you've assigned to it to rejoin. It may not necessarily, it's highly unlikely in all likelihood that it would be the same person at the other end of it, depending on, because you can do this at any time, but they would have full access to the log. They'd be able to familiarize themselves with what the options talk was and lead the person to, do you wish to proceed? And then on the basis of that, then hand it over to the most appropriate, whether if you've nominated, like I said before, if you've nominated a known offender, we'll pair you with someone in your region. If you've reported an unknown assault, it would go to the sexual crime squad. Sorry, this is speaking from
of course.
with Victoria as the example. The issues, and we've spoken about this offline before, about there are some states who say that they have anonymous reporting mechanisms. A lot of them are, well, one in particular does better than the others, but a lot of them
Shout out WA.
Shout out WA. Safe to say. But the other states are largely forms, and the first thing you're confronted with on the anonymous reporting form is, who are you?
It's so silly.
Tell me who you are. And while you can continue without filling that in.
Yeah. You might not know that. It's pretty confronting to, think you're anonymously reporting and the first question you're asked is, what's your name?
Yeah, because you might turn away completely before you get to the bottom of the page that says, oh, by the way, if you want to remain anonymous, you can continue on. But even if you do make it that far and continue on, that means whatever you say on the next page is just going into the ether. That's just for information.
I think as well, what I love about Safe Disclose are like the clear responses to like the big barriers. It's like first thing, reduction of touch points.
Yep.
Second thing, best practice evidence collection, like not getting someone to break their narrative into ticker boxes or asking them closed questions that might warp memory because they're trying to meet, the needs of a form. And then the big thing with current alternative or anonymous reporting mechanisms is that you've got to repeat that process again if you want to go in and make a formal statement in person.
Yep.
And so this would be used in place of a statement, which is also significant not just to avoid the retelling, but it's about having multiple disclosures and the discrepancies between both, and then defence getting a hold of them and using myths to discredit you.
Yeah.
And then also the last big thing for me is that like support and triage and options and agency are centric. Like it's about legal literacy, right? We know you and I have talked at length about how victims are just blindsided by procedure and no one can give them clear information about what to expect. And this is like, let me kindly tell you what to expect, but honestly, kindly but honestly tell you what to expect, and you can decide for you if it's the right thing. So you're not going in blind thinking that you're doing something you're not. You're not wondering what if, and you've got that what if looming over you for, God knows how long. And at the end of the day, support is, forefront, whereas it's taken up until I think a year or two ago for New South Wales, for example, to have support options listed at the start, not the end of the form. And it's a really traumatizing form. It's not quick and easy. It's not just like a little thing you can open up a tab and do it.
It's forced questions, like we spoke about.
So many of them are.
And I guess this sort of pivots into what one of the big challenges we've had in trying to onboard Safe Disclose. So we went and we built out this portal that could allow these conversations to happen. But I spoke about resourcing challenges in policing nationwide, and it's not untrue, this reality that we're offering a solution at a time of low resources. I'm asking them to dedicate more resources to it. So, we now explore, and exploration being the key phrase here, if there is an ethical way to do this, to build from the ground up, not borrow anybody else's systems. Is there a way of training an AI model to do this, to have this conversation? And it would have to reach certain thresholds for me to ever take this from being a concept behind closed doors to, and I would need far greater experts than me to sign off on whether it is an ethical approach. But if you could train an AI model that was centered in empathy and could have a disclosure conversation with the necessary structure, which still follows the open question at the start, tell me everything you can, and then follows signposting principles, which is signposting is that sort of, if you go through all the information that I've just said to you as a reporting person, picking out the headlines that I need more information on. So not asking, not having a rigid set of questions. We're talking about sexual violence. I feel like we're far enough into it. Not did he touch you? No leading questions. It's just, okay, you spoke. It might be you spoke about him touching you. Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me more about that? That is such an important distinction, because if you say, did he touch you? And you say yes, there's a defense thing. You probed that. You asked that question. She might not have.
It's just crazy how behind like interview protocol is from best practice. Like, I find it really bizarre more than anything.
Yeah. So like the specialists again in Victoria, like they're very much in line with best practice. But that first set of notes, that's the problem. So if we can find a way that we could do an ethical build of this, and it still has the options talk at the end, and then instead of if a person does elect to pass on their details, it becomes a portal, and that chat is extracted and goes to the appropriate person, and they can. So there is I've had down moments where I'm like angry at the world that this is such a achievable solution. It should be in place. It should be the norm. And again, shout out to WA. They're doing as close to a version of this as what we can, which I think acknowledges essentially puts, and you've probably dived deeper into Safe to Say than what I have, but essentially I would say the key point of difference is theirs is somewhat of like an email inbox. It's not necessarily a live back and forth, which, and that might be the perfect solution for somebody that needs, I can only do bite-sized pieces, but there might be somebody that you've only got one shot at talking to them. And
they can't have a record of it in their inbox, for example.
Yeah. So it's tough, but they're trying. And that's
the main thing.
And that is like when I've had meaningful conversation, and I thought about whether I should name them. I won't, just because in case they're listening to this, maybe they'll see this as a bit of good grace, and they'll come back to us and say they want to onboard. But I had a meeting with a state-based jurisdiction, and their response was, at the end of the day, after I did all of this, at the end of the day, they can call or they can come in. If they want to make a report, they've got options. And I said,
we're happy with the low reporting rate and the high.
That is exactly what I said. With all due respect, 92% of people disagree with you.
Yeah. And
they just did not care. And I went through a politician to get that meeting. They were ignoring me. So I went to a politician who partnered with me with them. So, but one of the big things I say to anyone that will listen is that all of this is in theory. I cannot promise you that this stuff will work. Based on all of the research that we put into it, identifying what barriers exist, we believe that it answers the barriers and it will help people overcome the barriers. But I guarantee the community will be far happier to see that we've tried and failed than to just bury our head in the sands, because we cannot have another politician stand up and say that we need change when they're not willing to back it.
What's something every complainant should know before walking into a station, and what's something you wish every officer understood?
Again, I
just casually.
I knew these questions were coming. You gave me the heads up. You're not dropping this on me, and I'm trying to think about what the most important thing to say. I would say, and we're looking at what it is currently. So the system based on what it currently is not a best case scenario if all of these solutions are put in place.
Mm-hmm.
As we currently sit right now, I would say to a complainant walking in, be very aware of what your goals are from having reported. Can you detach an expectation of justice from that motivation? Because that's probably the last thing that can be guaranteed, is that you'll reach that justice. But I would absolutely implore that they know that police do have the ability to make really powerful referrals to really good organisations. So even if you're not keen to pursue, if you want to speak to police, they can help you engage with people that can help you through it. That's not the solution that's up in lights for people when they think about reporting, but there are other metrics to it. But prioritize your welfare. That is the most important thing. You are the most important person in this process. You are not inconveniencing anyone by looking out for yourself. You do have agency in what happens. I don't know a movie from more modern times for the Gen Alphas and Gen Zs other than Speed, but you can get off the bus at any time. For police, I would just say that you might be having a bad day, and there's plenty of bad days, but we can be pretty confident that if somebody's coming in to tell us this story, they've had a worse day. So we're the least important. So from saying that a complainant, you are the most important person in this story, we're the least important. And that's not to diminish, like we've already spoken at length about the burden of carrying the weight of this, but and you have every right to feel all of your feelings about how the day has been heavy for you, but you can't make the person standing in front of you feel that they are an inconvenience. They need to be centered in everything that you do.
I'm so happy you came in to speak to me today. I really hope listeners get something out of it. I'm sure they will. I know that I could gossip with you until the cows come home about the nuances of police reform and legal reform. And yeah, I just want to say again that I really don't take it lightly that you're here sharing your actual experiences, and your expertise. It's so valuable, and I think it represents something a lot bigger than you as well. But yeah, I'm really appreciative, and I'm sure we'll be having more chats soon. And Jacob and I will go debrief now. I reckon.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. It sounds good. And you're exactly right. There are people operating within imperfect systems, and I'm not in there at the moment, but I see you. I know you're trying your best. I hope you're trying your best, but it's on change makers, power brokers to acknowledge that this is a problem and fix it for the people trying to navigate an imperfect world.
If you've listened this far, you already know something most Australians don't. Victim survivors are the only people in sexual offence trials without their own lawyer. That doesn't have to stay true, but justice systems don't change because they quietly evolve. They change because people understand them and demand better. Go to withyouwecan.org to be a part of that demand. This has been What No One Told Us.